Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 21 of BrewFOs. Today, my guest is Timothy Hogan. He's the Grandmaster of the Order of the Temple Secret Initiates and also the Templar Collegia. He's a lecturer and author and a tour guide. And I'm happy to have you on the show. Tim, I've been watching you for a few years, so this is really cool. Scott Wolter connected us. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, can we let's just start right off with so Grandmaster. Um, for people that don't know, I'm a little more familiar, but for people that don't know, this is when they think Knights Templar, they think a lot of people always think Catholic Church. And
Right.
so could you kind of bring us up to speed?
Absolutely. Yeah. So part of the misconception when people think of the Knights Templar, the Templar Order was secretly established as early as 1096. But part of what they were doing is they were looking for artifacts in the Holy Land, and they needed kind of a cover for what they were doing. And at the time, the Crusades were going on. So there were all these Roman Catholic military orders that were going into that area and to specifically try to kick the Muslims out of the Holy Land at the time. And uh, the Templars, they had to be an official order back then and to be able to have the movement that they wanted and to be able to do the things that they wanted in the Holy Land. They needed to get Roman Catholic endorsement at the very least. Fortunately, one of the earliest grandmasters of the order, his uncle was Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who was one of the most outspoken people of the church at the time, and he managed to. It, never mind the fact that Saint Bernard Clairvaux was actually secretly a Druid, but he was working within the church, and he managed to. Saint Bernard Clairvaux had also set up the Cistercian tradition, and so there was kind of this agreement that the Templar Order would work as Cistercians, but that they could also fight and develop on their own. And Saint Bernard of Clairvaux would develop their rule, and so what happened was then they managed to get the Pope thought this was a good idea at the time. So he agreed to provide Roman Catholic patronage, not just endorsement, but patronage, and with the understanding that they only had to answer to the Pope; they didn't have to answer to anybody else. And this was partially because there was agreement that the Templar Order said, "Look, we're looking for these artifacts. We'll give you first dibs, and if we find anything, basically." And so the Pope was agreeable to this. Over time, then it became this associated with the Roman Catholic Church, even though Hugh de Paynes and Godfrey de Saint Omar who were two of the founders of the Templar Order, had been initiated into a Johannite Gnostic tradition in Constantinople, and there had also been some crossover there with the Eastern Church at the time, and so they were actually they had all of these connections. by the time 1307 came around, Philip the Fair of France wanted to use the order for their money. He wanted to become the new war king of Europe, and he owed the Templar Order money. And he had also been managed to get some control over the Roman Church itself. So, in particular, Pope Clement V. And by that time, the Templar Order had established relations with all kinds of different groups, including different Muslim groups, Druze groups, Sabaean groups, the Coptic Church, just to name a few. There have been even more than that, but they had established all of these connections and were on good terms and friendly basis with them. And so when Pope Clement V and Philip the Fair decided to suppress the Templar Order, they brought them up on heresy charges, and they were accused of associating with all these different groups, and including also a bunch of Gnostic groups that were all over the place. So, because secretly, that's really what they were. They had always been this Gnostic tradition. And they were connecting with other groups that had Gnostic tendencies. And Gnosticism at the time was considered a heresy by the Roman Church. So, and the primary reason was that the Gnostics believed that, amongst other things, that you didn't need the intervention of a priest to get to heaven. That they also didn't believe that Jesus came here to save our sins, to forgive us for our sins, and die and resurrect. They believed that the crucifixion and the stories of the crucifixion were largely symbolic, and that the resurrection comes from the Greek word anastasis, which just means to wake up. And so they interpreted this as a waking up to gnosis, and that he came here to show us that death wasn't real, because death was the one thing that fear of death is the one thing that enslaves people on this planet, and Gnostics are about liberation. The Gnostics also believed that everybody had a spark of the divine within them. And because of this, they didn't need to be saved, because they were already saved. They were already good in God's eyes, in the true God that they believed was the God from the realm of light, which was this monad that brought everything into oneness. And part of waking up to gnosis was this waking up to this oneness. And so they had no problem with people of any faith secretly joining the Templar Order and participating in this great work that they were trying to do. And part of that work also included providing freedom to people. So they were no longer bound by the, back then your rights either came from the monarch or the church. And that was it. Everyone was a slave to either the monarch or the church. And the Templars because they believed the divine spark was within everybody. They believed that everybody should have their own self-rule, so that they could make decisions for themselves for their own awakening.
I like that.
And, yeah,
that's a good message.
Yeah, it is. It is. So yeah, but ultimately the Templar Order was suppressed because of this. They went underground, and then they continued to operate. And because they had already established these good relations with people not only throughout the Middle East and Europe, but as far away as India and as far west as North America. They were doing these secret travels where they were meeting with Indian tribes, indigenous Native American, First Nation tribes, and even went as far south as, by some accounts, as far south as Brazil, and had settlements in Panama, and had and were trading silver with the Mayans. And so they had all these relations set up, and they'd already mapped all of North America. So they just went there and started working with the tribes because they recognized them as having the divine spark within them too. So it wasn't a problem. And to this day now, the Templar Order it's had some fractions over the centuries, where there have been leadership. Well, either times, other times where they had to kind of go more underground, and then other times where they've been able to come forward a little bit more. But they've continued to promote the same message, even though there's different kind of lineages of the Templar Order now that kind of grew out of different places after they had gone underground. So, but they continue to fight for the same things while they explore the mysteries.
Okay.
That takes us to today.
Yeah. And so your do you consider your order, like, are you directly from that lineage, or are you just following it closely, or what's?
Yeah. So I was been knighted into a Templar lineage out of France that had well, it's a worldwide lineage, but the Grandmaster before me, when I was brought into the order, was in France. Raymond Bernard.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, can you share what's the name of it, or no? Is that like secret?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's the Order of the Temple of Secret Initiates is basically what it is in English, or the OTSI. But it's kind of like more of a parent body where there's a number of other Templar lineages that feed into it, including the OST, which is the Order's Secret du Temple, the OSM THU, there's a number of these other little lineages that feed into it. So we get Templars from these different lineages, and they all have to go through a pre-study body, which we refer to as the Templar Collegia. And actually, people who have never been knighted as a Templar have to go through this. If they want to become a Templar, they have to go through the Templar Collegia as well. It's just a pre-study body where we make sure everybody's on the same page. And we get them all what we feel is some of the most important information that the Templar Order has been passing down over the centuries, so that by the time we officially knight them, that everybody's on the same page, and they all have at least somewhat of familiarity or somewhat of a background. What this work's about, what we're committed to, and what we need to do going forward.
And it's like joining Starfleet. Like they have to actually care about it, care about each other. You can't just accept everybody. But
100%, yeah, 100%, yeah. And most people that come to us also come to us from other esoteric traditions, shall we say? I mean, not everybody, but a lot of them do, and it's because within most Western esoteric traditions, at some point along the way in your study, you come to understand that all of these esoteric ideas all came through the Templars, and that's how they were brought to Europe originally. and that the Templar Order created underground expressions of itself in different forms that grew into these esoteric traditions. So it just makes sense to go back to the source, at a certain point in your study, I would say.
Yeah. Sorry if I'm just excited to talk about all this. So if I cut you off on accident, I'm sorry. But you were saying that Bernard knighted you, a guy in France, or
Yeah,
the previous
Raymond
Grandmaster.
Bernard. Yeah, so Raymond Bernard was his name. He was a very famous French esotericist.
Okay.
He had been involved in Amorc at one point in time, the ancient mystical order Rosicrucis, out of France, and was kind of running things there. And he was one of my mentors, and Dr. Onslow Wilson, who was the Grand Commander for the North America. And Dr. Onslow Wilson was a very famous esotericist too. Um, so they had a big influence on me, as well as Jacqueline Uncas, who is for people who are familiar with Girard Uncas, whose esoteric name was Papus or Papu. It was his daughter-in-law was a big influence on me, and
Wow.
as well as a number of other things. And then I'd also been I was also a Freemason already, and Freemasonry has always been part of this Templar lineage. It came out of the Templars, and this is why in almost all the higher degrees of Freemasonry, doesn't matter. There's lots of different what are referred to as rites of Freemasonry, which are a series of degrees. There's like a York rite, and a Scottish rite, and a Swedish rite, but they all culminate in Templar degrees, because they're part of the utility is to remind Freemasons where their tradition came from. So,
And when you said the daughter-in-law, what was her name again?
Jacqueline Uncas.
So that's another. So women are allowed to join.
Yes, they are. There are some bodies like Freemasonry, standard Freemasonry in particular, that tend to be men only, but they also have women only Freemasonry and co-ed Freemasonry. But the origins of all of it goes back to the Templars, and the Templars themselves, clear back during the Middle Ages. Between the years 1118 and 1307, they had a number of women members. I mean,
Whoa.
most people think of them as just these knights on horseback, fighting during the Crusades, but they actually had, for every knight, there was, up to 30 different other people that were in the Templar Order that were also involved in the Templar work. And everything from clerics to farmers to sea captains to and there were also women that were involved in nursing and fabric making and all that other stuff. And there were there was even some very famous women Templars who were priors or preceptors of the different territories around Europe. So they could accede to these higher ranks where it wasn't just they weren't just cooking the food. They were actually running the preceptors, and they were fighting along with the other Templars if they needed to. So
Is is there any knowledge of any women that were knights?
oh yeah, they were women that were knights. Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was it wasn't a lot, and there was also records of married couples joining the Templar Order together,
Whoa.
going, way back to the beginning. So, and out of this came also a lot of the Grail legends, the legends of the Holy Grail, um, and being a Gnostic tradition, they also women could also become Templar priests
Oh wow.
and bishops, and within their Gnostic traditions. Um, an example of this is Hugh de Paynes, who was the first Grandmaster of the Templar Order. His wife was Catherine de Sinclair, and they were both involved in the Templar work. And Kath, Kath, Kathleen's uh, cousin was Chrétien de Troyes, who wrote the very first Grail legends
Hmm.
that were put out there. So in of Troyes in France, where the Templar rule was also first um, revealed by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. So it's there's a lot more going on than how history paints it. But part of the reason we have the misconceptions that we have today, that it was just a men's only crusading order, is because that's what the Roman Church wants to paint it as. Because they, in their mind, the Templar Order didn't exist until they granted it the rule, and that when they disbanded the Templar Order and declared it no longer under Roman Catholic patronage, uh, they declared it uh, destroyed or finished at that point. And that was the law of the land at the time. So that's just what everyone believed, even though the order did continue to exist underground for centuries through various channels up until today.
And and oh man, there's so much I could talk to you about. I'm going to try to like keep my thoughts clear here. So they were basically on the run after being suppressed, and some of them were burned at the stake, and they were on the.
Yeah.
Would you say you guys are still on the run today? Because it really does feel like we're still kind of in a Roman Catholic maze.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we're on the run, but we're definitely more discreet than we used to be. I mean, there's even been periods of time, uh, including back in the 1600s and again in early 1800s, where there have been lineages within the order that have sought to try to reconcile with the Roman Church. Um, uh, but ultimately to no avail. There's just too many. At its core, Templar tradition is a Gnostic tradition, and there's just no getting around that from a Roman authority standpoint. I mean, uh, if they were to acknowledge that the that early Christianity and up until the modern day with the Templar tradition was correct, uh, it would destroy its entire control mechanism that it uses to uh, make money, amongst other things. Uh, that's where it gets its authority from. Is the other thing that the Templars believe, and this will be surprising to some, but this was also a very much a Gnostic belief, was they believed in reincarnation. They believe that you continue to come back here until you figure out how to not have to come back here, and then at that point you have to make a choice if you still want to come back to try to help people and help the order, or if you just continue to abide in this realm of light that's uh, where you're it's no longer you don't need to come back. It's a choice at a certain point. Yeah, but the fact that they believed in reincarnation at all was very much, again, that was contrary to uh, Roman Church doctrine. So,
And wasn't the I mean, even with gnosis and the Gnostics, isn't that it just means like knowing, and so it's more
yeah,
like knowing instead of like getting this knowledge, getting this like eternal knowing instead of like a belief or like
right,
following a
yeah,
belief system.
yeah. It was gnosis comes from the Greek. The Greek word gnosis means to know, but it's not like book knowledge. It's divine revelatory knowledge. It's knowledge that ultimately comes from within, and from looking around the world and recognizing that civilization and people in general, they keep causing the same problems for themselves over and over again because they're ignorant to who they really are and where they really come from, and where they're really going. And once you figure that out, uh, you have no choice but to try to help liberate others. And so this is part of why these systems were put in place, or the Templar orders tried to put these systems in place, like represent representative democracy, for example. The idea that everybody has a say in their government, uh, and that ultimately the hope was that you'd have representatives who were a little more awake than others, who could help guide that. Not as rulers per se, but as facilitators to allow greater awakening amongst people. We've gotten a little far away from that within our current representative democracy models, but
How
this
are
was the hope, anyways.
yeah, I mean, how are you doing like currently with everything that's going on? It just seems I
Well,
mean, us talking
it's
right now, even when we
crazy.
get off, something crazy probably just happened, you know?
Yeah,
Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah. I mean, we're in a time of huge transition right now, and it's going to get even crazier in the years ahead.
Okay.
I mean, within 5 years from now, the world that we know is going to be totally changed. Everything that was our stable models and anchors uh, for the last 1,000 years is about to change. And one of the things that we really have to be careful of is we need to make sure that um, we're going to have incredible material successes, particularly with AI. Is going to allow us to develop new things, robotics, other things like this. But we need to make sure our technology doesn't outpace our spirituality, and and when I say spirituality, what I mean is not blind allegiance to a religion, or to some dogma, but we need to be we run the risk of getting out of touch with who we really are, and our real creative source, and um, and our connection with each other. And uh, our current technology models has a potential to really hurt that. So, um, that's going to be the great challenge in the years ahead, is to how do we use our technology to give us time and freedom to really explore ourselves more, uh, our inner nature of who we really are, and how we're really connected, and what's our real place in the cosmos, and what's our really what's our spiritual potential there, as opposed to just getting lost in the technology.
Yeah, and I have a little notebook right here where I write down topics and questions for you, and that was one of the questions was about AI. I was just wondering if the Templar Order, if are you a former Freemason or are you still would
I'm a
you
current I'm a current Freemason
is it
still.
like
Yeah,
you're once a Freemason, always a Freemason kind of thing, unless you
yeah,
get kicked out? Or
yeah. I mean, unless you get kicked out, and as long as you continue to pay your dues, you stay involved.
okay,
I've been I've received you know probably 80 degrees in Freemasonry
oh
between
wow,
the various different rites. I mean, I'm a Scottish Rite Freemason. I'm a Knight Commander of the Court of Honor in that. I'm a York Rite Freemason, where I've received the Order of the Temple degree. I've gone through the what are referred to as the Allied Masonic degrees, which are a whole separate body of extra degrees that are out there. Uh, there's a Rosicrucian Masonic Rosicrucian tradition that I've been received those grades. Uh, and then there's all kinds of other just side degrees that are out there that you get introduced to from time to time, and they're all designed to build um, build yourself morally, to keep your ship on track, so to speak, from a moral perspective. But then there's also you get introduced to esoteric sciences, and ideas and spiritual ideas, religious ideas, um, not in a not in a proselytizing way, but as a general exploration. And so you can, they don't tell you what to believe. They just say, here are the beliefs that are out there, and you can kind of pick and choose, what you get out of them. Same with the esoteric sciences. They may introduce them to you, but they don't force you to learn them. You know, at least if it's of value to you, then they encourage you to study it further. Um, but they ultimately, Freemasonry came. So when the Templar Order, one of the things that the Templar Order did back, you know, clear back in the 1100s and the 1200s, was they took some of the money that they were obtaining from the Crusades and some of the knowledge that they were acquiring, and they used it to start to build the cathedrals around Europe,
hmm.
and as well as other Gothic structures. And so there was a whole fleet of stonemasons within the Templar Order, and one of the things that was of value if you were a stonemason back then was because your craft was so specialized, you were one of the few people that could travel from kingdom to kingdom, without needing permission from a king, right? And so when the Templar Order was suppressed and it had to go underground, one of the easiest ways for it to hide itself was as stonemasons. This allowed them to travel, and because they already had the expertise and they'd already been building these cathedrals, they were able to just kind of continue business as usual underground,
Hmm.
and put and hide their secret doctrine on these cathedrals themselves. But as time went by, obviously we stopped building major cathedrals regularly. But that science then became that operative science became a speculative science, where they're able to preserve their knowledge in rituals and in Masonic stonemason tools and and lessons, but then hide other things within that. And ultimately, the purpose then of Freemasonry became a system that could, well, according to its own tenets, it was the science that was preserved by Noah after the flood, after the last cataclysm. And so it was the science of rebuilding civilization, or the science of building civilization itself. And so to this day, I mean, every Freemason memorizes a certain amount of information that can be utilized for keeping civilization on track if civilization is doing fine, or should there be another cataclysm, it can be used to rebuild civilization again. And so every Freemason is kind of entrusted with that.
So with that too, I was going to ask you if well, actually, let me ask you this first, and then I'll keep that hold a pin in the flood and Noah right there. But
yep.
When you were talking about where we're going with AI, and even the next 5 years, we have to maintain our to look within while we have this technology basically turning us into that. I don't know if you ever saw that movie WALL-E, but all these robots are doing everything, and everyone starts to become like fat, and they just are slobs, and they don't do anything yet.
Sure.
But I was wondering, do you guys use or utilize AI at all, or is it if you put in information or secret information, like maybe these companies would get it, so you're like, screw that, I'm not going to use it? Or
we don't tend to. I mean, AI is ultimately going to be kind of an echo chamber, right? Because it's all going to be making decisions based on the information that's already been put out there, put into the system. There are some things that probably will remain secret, and then there's other things that are put out there. Again, ultimately, we're more concerned with, at this point, helping people to get in touch with that divine spark within them that is created by nature and will help allow them to make the decisions to rebuild if we need to, or to try to make good systems going forward. One of the biggest concerns as we become more dependent on our technology is we're more at risk should that technology fail. Right? And the very things that we believe wiped out the previous great civilization, that the story of Noah is kind of a story about, we're just at risk of to this day. I mean, if we were to have if the more dependent we are on our technology, all it takes is one massive solar flare, for example, and it could wipe out everything electronic. And if that were to happen, all the systems that we depend on would not work anymore. You wouldn't be able to drive your car. You wouldn't be able to look up things on your phone. You wouldn't have a phone. You wouldn't be able to flush your toilet because there would be no pumps pumping water. You wouldn't have water being pumped to your house. You wouldn't have food being shipped to your area, right? I mean, all the systems that we depend on would just stop. And the government estimates that within 2 months, 80% of the population would die if that were to happen. So it would literally,
wow.
knock us back to Little House on the Prairie times, but all over the world, and we just wouldn't have the systems developed to do anything. And so, if that were to happen, the tools that the Templar tradition, and when I say Templar tradition, which includes Freemasonry and Rosicrucian traditions and other things like this, the information that they're sitting on that each person has had to learn, they would have to utilize that information to not only rebuild civilization, but be able to find that inner knowledge on how to do things too. Not be dependent on systems to think for us. So, and that that would be a huge reset. If that were to happen, all it takes is, again, one solar flare or one massive super volcano going off and shutting things off, or one comet or asteroid impacts that could really take us back. And so you're going to need people who have the inner drive and the knowledge to rebuild government, to make their own medicines, to restructure society again, just to survive.
And that's what you're saying about Noah. So like, so everyone knows pretty much like the Great Flood myth, and there's different ones like religions that say different things, and but basically, if I watched Mysteries of the Knights Templar, you and Scott on, and you might get a season 2, right?
Yeah. That's what we've submitted a proposal for season 2 now.
Yeah, I'll put links to that. Everything we talk about, I'll have links to your stuff in the episode notes. But that was a cool show. But you talked about Atlantis not being a place. Everyone thinks of Atlantis as a place, but more of like a high civilization prior to ours. And then some type of cataclysm happened. And was that what caused the flood?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's our understanding that, the story of Noah and the story of Atlantis, and there's other, Babylonian myths and Sumerian myths, and there's Asian myths, ancient Chinese myths. They all talk about this flood in antiquity, and you find it literally all over the world. There's Egyptian myths of it. There's Mayan myths of it, Nahuatl culture myths of it. But they all talk about this civilization that existed, and that there was this cataclysm that wiped it out. And we believe that this Plato actually said it occurred 9,000 years before his time, which would have put it exactly at the time of what was referred to as the Younger Dryas cataclysm, where sea levels rose 300 feet, all worldwide. This is what we believe, that there was, for some reason, we know the ice shelves melted rapidly. And Randall Carlson does some good exploration of this. But there was 3 miles of ice that went from the North Pole down to Chicago area, and 3 miles high, and it all just melted rapidly. This happened. This is what formed the Great Lakes. This is what formed the English Channel. It's what expanded the Mediterranean Sea. There was, if you look at if you were to take a submarine down to the bottom of the English Channel, you'll see the foundation of houses. because that all used to be above water. And so all that flooding just, people lived primarily on the coast back then, just like they do today. And it just resulted in mass cataclysm. So, but worldwide, I mean, it wasn't just in one particular area. So, we do believe that there were, right before the cataclysm occurred, there were stages of cataclysm probably, and that there were pockets of survival kind of spread out, and there were areas of preservation. In the area that we now refer to as Egypt, in particular, was one of these main survival areas where technology was brought and knowledge was brought and was preserved as best they could. And then it was lost, I mean, it became its own civilization for a while. And we know that even the Egyptians later on, started refinding these things that they had forgotten about or had become lost or had maybe been buried. And as they discovered these evidence of these technologies and knowledge, it really freaked them out. But they started to try to do preservation efforts. As an example, the Sphinx the Sphinx in Egypt it's undergone several restoration efforts over the centuries, but it very clearly seems to date back, I mean, at least to that time period. But there's a lot of things like that around Egypt, and there is evidence of technologies that the Egyptians didn't have, including drill marks and saw marks, even the moving of some of the granite out of Aswan into places like Giza. We don't know how they did it. I mean, quite frankly, there's lots of people who just say it was done. We can say it was done. We can see the rose granite and tell it's from Aswan, for example. But in order to move these giant blocks, they had to get them down to the Nile. You had to go over a mountain range first, and then bring them down to the Nile. And then you'd have to put them in a boat that was large enough to, and then once you get it in the boat, how do you get it out of the boat? I mean, and you'd think we would find evidence of lots of trial and error, lots of blocks that they tried to get it into the boat, and the boat ended up sinking, or we find these giant blocks at the bottom of the Nile. We don't, so it's and the Egyptians, the later Egyptians, they only had copper tools.
Yeah, so, I was just going to bring that up.
The copper can't even cut granite,
Yeah.
So with especially precise. So there's all kinds of things that those who really look into it will find the Egyptians found these things, and they tried to preserve them, and but it was even crazy to them. I mean, some of those drill marks within granite, for example, we can do that today, but it requires a high pressure drill, usually a diamond trip drill, where you have high pressure water being pumped through it so that it doesn't overheat and the drill bit doesn't melt or whatever. And how would the ancient Egyptians even do that? They wouldn't be able to, which suggests that it came from the pre-civilization before that. And many of the great megalithic sites around the world, you'll find at the base these incredible, huge megalithic stones with precision cuts and everything. And then as you start to work your way more up them, you find tinier stones, being used by the later civilizations.
Or a Roman Catholic church put on top of it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're like, wait a second.
Yeah, the largest pyramid in the world is at Cholula down in Mexico, and at the top of it is a Roman Catholic chapel
Oh.
because they thought it was just a hill, at first, because it all been the pyramid had been covered in dirt, over the centuries, So yeah, exactly. So, but Templars study these things, and they study not only we try to understand the technology that could have been um, inherited after the cataclysm, but also the philosophy, the and the ritual. There are ritual traditions in which information was preserved and passed down by different cultures all over the world. Uh, and there are certain commonalities that we find worldwide that are so specific that the only way it could be the same is if it all came from the same source.
Hmm.
And these ritual signatures, shall we say, have been how we've been able to find these other cultures that were preserving this information, preserving this technology.
Is some of the knowledge too? Is it just through what's the word I'm looking for? Just through audio or through mouth to ear? Because
Mouth to ear, 100%. Yeah.
Uh, there's a professor of religious studies, Diana Pasalka. She's written 2 books specifically on UAP stuff, and
Yep.
her most recent book, I think it was her most recent one, Encounters. She talks about people within the defense agency and some of these intelligence agencies. They only work through secrecy with word of mouth, and they remember everything. They don't write anything down.
Of course, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I was wondering if that's what was the same for,
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of it is just memorized. Because if cataclysm comes, or some sort of other major, disaster, you're not going to be able to rely on your cell phone to get information or your computer. I mean, you're just not. I mean, there'll be books, printed books that can be preserved up to a point, or they have to be recopied again and again by hand in order to preserve it over the time. Or it just has to be passed on through memorization. And especially, so I'm glad you brought up the UAP subject, because this is also something that the Templar Order has been looking at for centuries. I could show you Templar paintings from back in the day that show UAPs in them, and there's also one of the things that the Templar Order discovered in Egypt is there's in the major sanctorums in most of the Egyptian temples, there's a room, and it's labeled in Egyptian hieroglyphs as being a Stargate.
Oh wow!
And there were certain pharaohs that were listed as masters of the Stargates, and they're depicted as going through these. some sort of, we don't know if it's a technology or it's through a psychedelic experience, but going into these areas and having the meters or the gods come through to teach them, or they go through to somewhere else where they're taught information and they bring it back to Egypt. And even at the base of all the major pillars of all the major temples in Egypt, there's a repeating image. It looks like a kind of a winged bird man who's holding its hands up in supplication to a star. And that hieroglyph, which you see everywhere at the base of all the pillars of all the major temples, it means received from the stars.
Whoa.
And suggesting that the entire knowledge of that temple and how it was built and everything came from knowledge from the stars. And there's certain star constellations in particular that they were believed to be connecting with. In particular, in Egypt, it's the star system of Sirius, and then also Orion. Orion is a major one. In fact, if you ever see the hieroglyphic depictions of the pharaohs on the temple walls, they're always depicted with these triangular aprons, and it's funny looking. It doesn't even make it makes no sense from a garment perspective, but its shape, which is very triangular, it's in the shape of the constellation of Orion itself. And so the pharaoh was emulating the shape of the constellation of Orion. And Orion was said to be the constellation of the god Osiris. And in the stories of the god Osiris, he was basically, he was Pharaoh. He was the chief god, and he was destroyed by his brother Set, who chopped him up into pieces.
Yeah.
And those all went different places. And Isis, whose name literally means throne or power, the chief throne of the when you think of the power behind government, you can refer to it as the throne, right? Well, that was Isis. And Isis went and recollected all of these pieces and put them back together again, and then rose Osiris from the dead. Well, in some ways, this is a metaphor for a couple different things. On the one hand, it's a metaphor for our own journey in this life, where we incarnate into this world and everything appears separate and distinct, and through our own journey, eventually we begin to see how everything's connected to everything else, and we bring it back into the oneness within our own consciousness. That's one metaphor for it. It's also a metaphor for the alchemical process, the lab alchemy process, which the Egyptians mastered, where you had to break things down into pieces, and then through a series of digestions or distillations and these other things, we could bring it back together again in a new form. There you go. Exactly. There's
his book. He talks about this.
So it alludes to that as well, but it also alluded to Atlantis itself, or what the Egyptians referred to as Utlant. If you go to the Temple of Horus at Edfu, there's a series of texts that are on the wall there called the building texts that talk about how civilization was first set up and where it came from. And it talks about these gods and these leaders coming from this place where there was a primordial mound that was an island, and it was referred to as Utland. And we think this is where Solon, uh, uh, Plato's great 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 grandfather, that's where he got the name Utlantis from. So he took Utland and turned it into Utlantis, which became Atlantis because of the in Hebrew, most of the Egyptian words they don't depict the vowels; they're implied. So Utland could just as easily be Atlant, and which of course would be Atlantis. So, um,
And with this too, you're saying that these Egyptians might have uncovered or dug up some stuff, and is that when you refer to the Arks of the Covenant?
correct, yeah. So within every, and when we do say arks, because the Templar Order found several arks when it first went into Egypt and Jerusalem and other areas around the world. We found these arks, and they're boxes that are made a particular way, usually with precious metals on the inside with an insulator of wood, and then another layer of metal on the outside. And they were said to have within them this substance that the Bible refers to as mana. You find this substance depicted on the Egyptian temple walls as well. It's referred as white gold or white gold powder. Sometimes it was referred to as bread, but it was made out of gold. And the the substance, we know what the substance is now. It's a monoatomic gold, which can be made alchemically. But it was the pharaohs used to eat this substance, but they also used to put it in the arks themselves. And every major temple in Egypt had one of these arks in them, in their sanctum sanctorum area, and these arks are depicted on the temple walls of all of the major Egyptian temples. And so when the Templars went down there into Egypt and they started digging around and doing archaeology, and they discovered some of these arks. But they weren't just in Egypt; they were also in places like Jerusalem and Baalbek in was now Lebanon, and there are reproductions of these arks that can be found being passed down within traditions, as far away as Japan. So there's if we go to again, like if we go to the Temple of Horus at Edfu, and look at those building texts where it shows the gods or the leaders, coming over from Atlantis into settle Egypt. It also depicts these arks on these boats, and so even within the when these arks were being depicted within the temples of Egypt, they were depicted on these boats, on these having been transported over here.
Could it also be, I was just wondering, like, because I know we have nuclear powered submarines and we have nuclear powered like aircraft carriers. Sure. Could they be powering the boats?
Could be, yeah. Yeah, it's quite possible. I mean, these things they were electrostatic capacitors. They would build up electricity over time within the areas where they'd be at, and then they would discharge it through the top of the box, not unlike a Tesla coil or something. And this is also why wool curtains. When you look at when Moses erected the tabernacle in the wilderness to put the ark in for a while before Solomon's temple was built, it was in these tents with these wool tents, with wool curtains, and which just helped to facilitate the buildup of the static electricity. And you couldn't touch the arks without electrocuting yourself. You'd die if you touched the ark. So the other things that the Egyptian temple walls depict is how the pharaoh would have these rods, and the rod was a grounding rod. You could literally put the rod into the ground and drop it against the ark, and then it would discharge the electricity, so you could open it. You could touch it. But otherwise, you couldn't touch it because just over a period of hours or days or weeks would just start to build up more and more electricity that it would store. So,
Yeah, that sounds a
yeah,
little more realistic to me than like it housing like an angel of death that's going to kill you or whatever it
right,
was before.
right,
Like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and we think that they were probably broadcasting this electricity within the regions. I mean, even some of the more ancient temples in Egypt have, and you find this all over the world, actually. I've found it in Cambodia. You certainly find it all over Bolivia and Peru. Uh, there would be these, the perimeter stones around the temples would have these, what are referred to as butterfly clamps between the stones. And they were like a piece of metal that was inserted between the stones that almost acted like a zipper system that would go all around the temple itself. And we think
Well,
these were like would receive the electricity that was being broadcast by these arcs, uh,
well,
and so you could just kind of plug in whatever you were making into the ground to do whatever you needed to. So, and it may be that this devolved into at a certain period of time. Uh, if you didn't understand what was going on, and you went into a temple and there was a statue of a god carved out of granite. Uh, Granite is piezoelectric, and so it would be very receptive to because it's full of quartzite, and it'd be very receptive to storing these charges. So if you were to touch the statue, for example, within the temple, it'd probably shock you, you know. And to the people who didn't understand the electricity, that would have led to all kinds of superstitious beliefs about the magical power of these statues and these gods. And so,
it's so cool, but it's so depressing in a way that to think that like there's this super advanced civilization, and then this cataclysm happens, and then the remnants of who we were are like
yeah,
trying to like okay, like or the this is who we were, keep this knowledge, and like but you can't like rebuild everything right away from where you
right,
were, and then
yeah,
you get Egypt like getting really advanced and like but like still not as advanced as we
nowhere
were,
near as advanced, right?
and then where we are now, I don't know if we're as advanced
We're,
as we were.
yeah, I don't. In my opinion, in my personal opinion, I think that we are just about at the same place that Atlantis was when it collapsed.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's weird. It's sad to think that it's taken us, 12,500 years to get back to where we were before.
Do you think Atlantis had the same problems that we're facing now? Like,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'm
okay.
sure they did. I'm sure they did. And I'm sure their own infighting and, you know, all the frailties of human nature existed back then as well. And probably why they weren't able to stop the cataclysm from happening to begin with, because they couldn't get organized enough to stop it because they're too busy fighting amongst themselves, just like we do today. So, we're at the same place with the same frailties, I think, as they were.
So yeah. So, do you have any hope for us?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, from a Gnostic perspective, Gnostics kind of believe this planet it's on the one hand, it was meant to be Eden, right? It was meant to be, the planet was meant to be Eden. It was meant to be this place where human beings were really created to tend to the garden, right? And to take care of the animals and who are probably, of course, many evolved here probably on the planet, but for all we know, a lot of them could have been brought here by other extraterrestrial civilizations. And it was our job just to take care of them,
Wow.
make sure that the system works. And, but it became, not only have we done a terrible job at that, which is part of the reason why they might be showing up again right now, a lot more. But I think that from a Gnostic perspective, this planet is a prison planet, anyways. And that it's a simulation, and that there's another dimension, that's above and beyond all this. But we have to wake up first to get to it, and we just keep committing the same mistakes again and again because we're ignorant of who we really are, where we really come from, and where we're really going. And so we fall into the same mistakes again and again and again.
How long is this going to happen? How long are we going to keep doing this?
I don't know. I mean, from the Buddhist perspective, from the Bodhisattva idea, like you have to keep reincarnating until everybody's able to finally wake up, and it may be that's where we're heading. Though with our technology, we also have the potential to enslave ourselves more, so and become more dependent on things. So we're in a weird place right now. There's one speculation. It has been theorized that part of the reason why the Egyptians were performing the mummification rites that they were doing was because there was a memory from the pre-civilization where they were able to just clone somebody. Someone died, they could reclone the body, and they figured out a way of reuniting the consciousness with that new clone body. So, the person remained relatively awake within the same body. And after that whole civilization collapsed, your only hope is to find ways to preserve the body and preserve the organs so that each of those could be cloned again eventually when we ever got back to the technology of being able to do it again.
Or what if putting your consciousness in like a robot body?
That's another, yeah, sure, absolutely. I think
that'd be wild.
There's some speculation that we're we're probably pretty close to being able to do that. And that may be, some people believe, these gray, what are referred to as the grays or the gray aliens. That really what they are is they're just automaton. They're actually bio robots where that are almost like drones that explore the universe, but the people, the consciousness that's in them is either they rebuild themselves, and transport the consciousness, or it could be that they're just again like drones, like they're animated by something else's consciousness elsewhere.
I've wondered that about us too. So I think I might have brought that up on the show before, though, is just like, what if, we are biotechnology ourselves, and
of course, yeah,
consciousness put into us.
Yeah. I mean, at a lot of the world myths around the world, prior to the last cataclysm, there were talks of what were referred to as the ant people. You find this in the Hopi tradition in particular. They talked about before the last shaking of the earth that there was the ant people came and brought humanity underground to survive, in certain areas. And we find that in Egypt too, for that matter. There are depictions of strange ant type people that are bringing the people underground. And one of the great mysteries of Egypt that I think is starting to come out more now is that the majority of Egypt, like the really cool stuff, is all underground.
Mm-hmm.
There are mass tunnel networks all throughout Egypt, and that the real civilization, it's almost like it developed from the underground up, and which makes sense for the fact that if for no other reason that it developed in a desert, where it's hot out and it's cooler underground.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to just look at it that way, but I think it was a lot more than that. I think there was because again, these tunnel networks that you find when you have access to some of it, like I do in Egypt, the amount of people and the amount of technology that would have been required to even make these things, these underground tunnel networks, it would have required thousands of people just to make it. And it's, to me, it suggests that they were probably survival shelters at one point in time that were then reutilized later on after they were rediscovered by pharaohs, thousands of years after the fact. We've done the same thing. I mean, I've read old discourses from the 1920s, for example, that talked about secret tunnel networks that went under the English Channel, and talked about where they were and how druids and such used to use these things to travel. And lo and behold, when we decided to build an underwater highway, when humanity decided to build an underwater highway under the English Channel, connecting Europe mainland to England, they built them in the exact same places where these tunnels had already been recorded as existing,
Whoa.
That's why they were able to build them so quickly, So I think there's a lot we've inherited and then reutilized. And yeah. But part of it was these tunnel networks. So, yeah.
I wanted to bring this up too. Is one of the recent UAP whistleblowers? His name's Dylan Borland. He's he just testified in the most recent hearing.
Yeah.
But he went on a podcast called Weaponized, and maybe I'll post the clip or just his quote because I'm just paraphrasing here. But he said that they've discovered what he knows from his own experience and classified stuff and what he can talk about just like vaguely is that
what I will say is this. I have direct first-hand knowledge and exposure to crash recovery, reverse engineering, integration of technology into
redacted,
as well as the most important piece of technology on the planet, and it's not the craft themselves.
It would be the power source.
You can make that assessment yourself. I think that the people that are in these programs know the truth to this stuff, and they are looking at it through a lens of this is true, this is true, this is true. This has been here for 8,000 years. This has been here for 4,000 years. Oh, we dug up this at an archaeological dig in hypothetically Egypt.
And I'm wondering if he's talking about the Ark or an Ark or something, but he says he knows about this, and he says it's I think the other thing he says it's more interesting or more crazier than the craft themselves when you're talking about UAP. So I don't know, but
it's possible. You know, the one of the things that, of course, are talked about in the ancient world that I like to point out is this superconductive substance that went in these arks, which the Bible referred to as manna. It is a not only is it superconductive, but it can cause, when you make it, and this is going to sound kind of fantastic, but I can make it as an alchemist. So that process is passed down within our Templar tradition, but you make it out of platinum metals, and in particular gold is one of the best facilitators of it. But when you make it, there's a certain point where you're breaking down the gold, and then at a certain point it phase shifts into a higher dimension. It literally disappears. And then you create the conditions to bring it back. When you bring it back, it takes on this new form. And this new form is a powder. It's still gold, but it's in this new powder form. And when you bring it back, the container, if you had a container holding this powder, and you had the same container with nothing in it, and you weighed them both, the container holding the powder will weigh less than the same container with nothing in it, which means that it's causing some sort of weightlessness, and it's probably phase shifting matter as we recognize it in our dimension into a higher dimension.
Wow.
And which is causing it to weigh less. And so then we find other texts, of course, in the Old Testament. Well, there's two ways of getting this mana. One is to turn platinum metals into this mana, like Moses burning the golden calf into this powder. The other way was you could calcinate down matter, and you could extract it out of calcinated matter. And that there was a certain amount of this mana that was in everything, but some things had greater concentrations of it than others. And so we believe that the mystery of the burning bush that Moses witnessed in God as a burning bush was really alluding to this process of you have to literally burn the bush, you have to calcinate down the bush in order to extract this mana out of it. But this is also why later on at the Temple of Solomon, they were demanding all of these burnt sacrifices, right? Because why would you need burnt sacrifices? Well, you need it so you could collect the mana out of the ashes. And there were texts like the Kebra Nagas, which was a Ethiopian text that had been removed from the standard canon of the Bible. And in it talks about King Solomon and his relationship with the Queen of Sheba, which, by the way, the word Sheba comes from Saba, which is the ancient Egyptian word for Stargate.
Whoa.
But he would fly in his flying craft from Jerusalem to Ethiopia to go visit her. We have other flying craft mentioned in ancient texts, including the Vedic texts that refer to Vimanas, right, which are these flying crafts. The ancient Sumerian texts, they talk about the gods having these flying crafts, and they're referred to as Shimanas. You go to places like Easter Island, the Polynesian cultures, they said that they moved the heavy moai statues with some sort of substance called manna. So
Wow.
We're finding a commonality here, right?
Yeah,
Mana,
very much. Yeah.
Shimana, Vimana,
Mm-hmm.
Mana. The Buddhist stone of enlightenment was referred to as Mani, as in Om Mani Padme Hum. But the Mani was this white precious stone of enlightenment. Anyhow, there was all of these. We find the same word for the substance all over the world, and it is. We believe it's this particular alchemical substance that can be metallic. Platinum metals can be converted into. It could also be extracted out of the ashes of things. And it can also be found in sea salt. Because we think that it's made deep in the earth and it's pushed up volcanically into the oceans. And then it just kind of gets captured in the seawater and can be extracted that way.
Well, then we could have pretty much unlimited amounts of it.
Correct.
Wow.
Well, and
Okay.
we think this is why the UAPs are hanging out in the ocean, right? I mean, the ancient texts talk about they came here, they helped. One of the reasons why they created humanity was to help mine for gold initially. What would they need gold for? Unless it was for this technology. But the fact that you could extract it out of sea salt as well. In fact, we think this is really even the story of the reason why many of the stories surrounding Jesus in the Bible in the New Testament are alchemical metaphors. And an example of that is Jesus being born from Mary in Bethlehem. Well, Mary or Maria literally means sea or salt water.
Mm-hmm.
The Greek word meaning sea, or it also means salt water. What happens when you heat salt water? It turns into salt cubes, right? Well, if you unfold the cube, if you look at a grain of salt under the microscope, it's a little cube. And if you unfold that cube, you get a cross, right? But hidden within that cross would be this manna, which was also referred to as bread, because they used to bake it in the bread to eat it. And where was Jesus born? He was born in Bethlehem, whose Bethlehem literally means house of bread. So you have you have Jesus being born out of salt water, or out of salt, in the house of bread, you know. This is just an example of alchemical metaphor that's grafted onto these stories. But yeah, there's all kinds of things like that. So these are things that the Templars study, and they try to pass on this knowledge. Obviously, it's a very different interpretation than the one that the Roman Church has perpetuated to stay in power.
Very much.
But we believe it is the correct one, and it's pointing to these lost technologies and sciences. And, you know, so like when Jesus said, upon this rock or this stone, I build my church, and everyone interprets it as Peter, because Peter means stone, or rock, comes from Petros. From an alchemical standpoint, it means something totally different. You know, it's alluding to this secret stone. And this is why in Revelations even it said, to he who overcometh will be given the white stone and the hidden mana. You know,
Would that be the Philosopher's Stone, or?
yeah, it would be one aspect of the Philosopher's Stone.
Okay.
It'd be the secret salt of the Philosopher's Stone. But yeah, and so these are all esoteric ideas, you know.
Yeah.
These are the types of things that the Templar Order has studied and looked at and tried to see, well, do we find it in other parts of the world as well? And we do. We find all these things. So it suggests that the tradition was inherited in different areas and probably came from the root civilization of Utlans, or Aslan, as the Mayans referred to it, or Atlantis, you know. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a couple more questions? Are you still good on
Sure.
time?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. You did you were on the Danny Jones podcast, and you talked about. By the way, I never cheersed you. You have your root beer there. I wanted to give you.
Yeah, cheers.
Okay, cheers. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, sorry, I only have the root beer, but I love root beer. So.
Yeah, no, root beer's good. It's fine.
It'd be a Guinness otherwise. So
next time.
Yeah.
But on Danny Jones, I think towards the very end, you talked about maybe in a couple of years you guys would be revealing that you have the remains of Jesus.
Yeah.
And
so we have vaults that we brought to the Americas we have artifacts that we brought to the Americas that we hid in vaults that we feel like we're not the owners of. We're just protecting. You know, we're trying to ensure that it wouldn't be destroyed by powers that through their own selfishness would abuse them, or would try to destroy them because it doesn't fit with the narrative that they're trying to condition people with. But in these vaults, amongst the artifacts, we do have a series of arks that we found between Jerusalem and Egypt and other places, Lebanon, and other places. And we did, one of the things that we found clear back in the Middle Ages was we discovered a tomb in East Jerusalem that had ossuaries in it, and which are like bone boxes. And the ossuaries had the names of what we refer to as the Holy Families, which included John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Jesus, and their children. And when I say their children, I'm talking about what appears to have happened is Mary Magdalene was married to John the Baptist first, and they had children. And then after he died and Jesus took on his mission, she also had children with Jesus. She was a wealthy patroness to both of them. And she was, for lack of a better word, a priestess within the tradition they were passing on. And so we collected those bones and we brought them here. We left some of the boxes, and we brought the bones here to the Americas, and we do hope to make those available in the near future. The bones are unique in some regards. There is some signatures in them that might even suggest extraterrestrial manipulation or genetic tampering.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So how's this? So why are you guys talking about it now or bringing it out, and how and when? We're like, I'm so interested in this.
Yeah, we hope to bring it out soon. We've been waiting to the point where this information can be broadcasted instantly around the world, and where we're at, and also to a point where there can be testing, independent testing, that can actually look at things at a genetic level, which we now have. So we believe that as we reveal these things, it's going to tell a very different story than, well, not totally different, but it's just going to put new meaning on the stories we've all been taught.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it may provide other answers. Not only about, and I should also say that the Templar Order, part of why it was also created was to protect these bloodlines that were said to have come out of both Jesus and Mary and John the Baptist. And the significance of the bloodline is it's not like it's magical. It's not like a superior race type of deal. It's not like some sort of weird genetic superiority or anything like that. But the significance of the bloodline is that they pass down through those families have continued to pass down the secret doctrine that they had inherited concerning what these parables that are found in the New Testament and in the Old Testament, where they really come from, what they really mean, and what they're really speaking to in terms of not only technology, but our own personal awakening. And it tells a different story than what the religious establishments have been forcing people to believe for centuries, and that's why they're dangerous. But we're at a point now where we can freely present this stuff, and we feel that it provides the necessary tools of understanding that we're going to need for going into this next zodiacal age that we're going into. we've been in the age of Pisces for the last 2,000 years, and we're now going into the age of Aquarius. And even in the New Testament, when when the disciples are going to go to the Last Supper, Jesus says to the disciples, he says, look for the person carrying the water jug and follow them into that house. And that's where this Last Supper is going to be. Well, each zodiacal age is called a house. And so and the symbol of the person carrying the water jug is the symbol for the age of Aquarius. So he was telling them, I'm finishing off I'm going to finish off the age of Pisces up until the age of Aquarius, and that's where the new things will be revealed. All the things will be revealed. So that's where we're heading right now. That is exactly the time frame we're in.
And Christians will know that too, because Pisces was like the fish and fisher of men, and
right,
of course, the fish symbol.
During the age of Pisces, all the disciples were fishermen.
Yeah,
he was described as a fisher of men, and that's the reason why we have the fish on the back of cars all
everywhere. Yeah,
but prior to that was the age of Aries,
mm-hmm.
And this is why, which was the lamb or the ram,
mm-hmm.
And this, of course, is why most of the symbolism around Judaism is based around this being a shepherd, a good shepherd,
mm-hmm.
Because it had to do with that ram, and it's even Moses was said to have horns, because in the Torah, because he represented the ram, in the Egyptian tradition, which largely also came out of that age. The god Amun was depicted as a ram, because it was that age, and so prior to that was the age of Taurus, and of course that was when that's the whole reason why Moses burned the golden calf, because the calf was the bull was the symbol of the age of Taurus. So there's been all throughout history, and that's also when, of course, the Vedic mysteries, the Indian mysteries were developed, and the bull became sacred. The cow became sacred during that time. But there's been a zodiacal shift, and all of our institutions and our religions and everything else have shifted with it and have adopted the symbolism of the age that it was going into at the time. And so we're now going into the age of Aquarius, and the Grail legends were designed to help prepare us for going into the age of Aquarius. So many of the mysteries in the Holy Grail legends.
And in this age, it's supposed to be, I know it's the parallel water flowing, and I think it's, isn't it supposed to be the age of truth or the age of knowledge or something?
So every zodiacal age, the symbol was always dual. There was always two, like Pisces is two fish,
mm-hmm.
but they're swimming in opposite directions. Whereas the age of Aquarius is two streams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still two opposites, but they're flowing together, right? How do you get you may have two opposites, but how do you get them to work together, to bring about change? I mean, it's like, the easiest way to look at that in modern day, of course, is, especially in the United States, is, you may have two radically different political parties, right? You have a left wing and a right wing, but mm-hmm. You need both wings to fly, right?
Yeah, that's
For the bird to fly, the eagle to fly. So, so anyhow, there's a lot of that. A lot of this age that we're going into is how do you reconcile those opposites, and to propel humanity forward. That's where we'll be heading.
Can I go back to the just you saying that maybe extraterrestrial manipulation with Jesus' bones?
Sure.
Can I just
Sure.
what do you mean by that? Like what? Did you guys already analyze them, or? And
no, but there's certain the skulls in particular tend to be more elongated.
Okay.
Right? And we find this all over the ancient world. There were certain elongated skulls that there were some that were clearly born that way, right?
And didn't use the wood to flatten or whatever.
Yeah. And then there were others where they used the wood to flatten. And it's almost like the people were trying to, the ones who were using the wood were trying to mimic the ones that didn't have to do that, right? And so you find this not only in ancient Egypt, you find it with people like the Pharaoh Akhenaten, for example, and Nefertiti and their children. Well, Akhenaten was the one who was the first one to say that all the gods were aspects of one God, right? And he called it the Aten. He got in a lot of trouble for that. But he started to change the paradigm of Egypt. But his brother, Tutmosis, who grew up in the palace with Akhenaten, he was never pharaoh himself, but he was, he grew up in the palace. When Akhenaten was deposed, and the Atenist religion had to go underground, it was his brother Tutmosis who led the Atenist followers out of Egypt. And Tutmosis was probably Moses, right?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and the Aten, or the Atenai, which just meant my Aten in ancient Egyptian, became Adonai, the word for Lord in Hebrew. And so that whole Hebrew tradition then had to, it left Egypt. It probably went into areas like Lebanon, became the Canaanites tradition. And Jesus was born out of that tradition. And so some of those genetic traits continue to be passed down.
So was it just Jesus? Are you saying Jesus' skull is elongated, or is it like Jesus and Mary and his kids all have elongated?
They all have elongated skulls.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So wow.
It suggests there's a tradition there.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my understanding of it, anyways. Now I haven't opened the vaults yet, but in terms of the tradition that's been passed down, I have former Templar leaders have checked on the vaults, and so I've seen some of the imagery, some of the early photography of some of what they were finding in those vaults, but they've since been sealed back up again. They haven't been opened, to my knowledge, in probably over 50 years at this point. And so
is it time? It's time. It's time to open them back up.
It's coming up time. I mean, they are in one of the vaults is in a pretty remote location, and there's only certain times of the year where the soil is soft enough that we'll be able to dig it up.
Whoa!
And we will reveal And, and there are landmarks all over the United States, ancient landmarks that the order has left that point to where these vaults are. And we will reveal all that too. That's all part of the story. And Scott Walter is doing a great job right now, and that's his main mission, is tracking all that stuff down so that when we reveal it all, we'll be able to show the full story.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, instead of legacy media, it's like the podcasters like go on Joe Rogan or,
That's
Danny
right.
Jones again or something. And
Exactly.
I think that's everyone's going to find out about it through them,
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Wow.
Yeah. But we have it's a kind of a miracle now, right? That you can be wherever you are, and I can be in Denver area.
Yeah.
Right now. We can have this conversation where we can instantly see each other. You can record it, make it available. We've been waiting for that type of technology, so we can, as when we do dig these things up, we can show it, and we can, the whole world will be able to see it, at once, and that helps to ensure it won't disappear too.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
That I'm neurodivergent. I came from a religious background. I was Christian. I grew up Christian, and then I left in my early 20s, and then I was like, no belief for me, and no joining any teams, or I don't have a political party. I don't.
Sure.
But I mean, Gnosticism sounds really cool to me. Everything I've learned about Gnosticism is like, I just want to know. I don't want to believe in anything. I just want to know things.
That's what it's all about. It's not about, from a Gnostic standpoint, it's not about looking for a savior. Jesus isn't even a savior. He's an exemplar, and only you can save yourself. I mean, but it comes from getting back in touch with that inner knowing, of who you really are and where you really come from, and we believe that at the source of this is a realization of our oneness, and how we're all connected. And we also believe we're living in a consciousness field, if you will, consciousness, a sea of consciousness. And actually, UAPs, they navigate this sea of consciousness, and it's the reason why there are techniques taught within the Templar Order that have started. There are other people starting to use them now, but there are ways of bringing down UAPs, for example, using your consciousness. And the only way that could be possible is if these UAPs have a consciousness technology interface, and that they're able to pick up on these subtle vibrations in the consciousness and show up where they're being requested.
Some of these whistleblowers are talking about that, like psionics, where they bring them down and with their conscious. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we are. That is where we're. That's our future technology. Is going to be tied into all of that. But from a personal standpoint, it's finding that within yourself. You're not only who you are, but how you're connected to everything else, and awakening latent faculties within you. And so the Templar Order is very much concerned with researching all that too. So
Yeah,
modern
I
Templars.
maybe I don't know, man. Maybe in a I've told Scott, I'm like, I can't join the Masons. I don't know if I could join like Templarism just because I just don't want to join anything. It's just my nature.
Yeah,
But I'm
that
trying to
doesn't
learn
matter.
as much as
It's
I
already in
can.
you. You know, the orders like the Templar Order are they're just designed to help facilitate that awakening and to establish connections with other people who are interested in it. And we don't have any dogma. We don't tell you what you have to believe. We just say, here's some tools. Check this out. If it resonates, then what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? If this is true, then who are you? Try it out for yourself. You know what I mean? Or here's some information that we've acquired over the centuries. You know, that tells a very different story than the history you've been taught. You know, look into it. If there's something to it, then what does that mean? You know, we don't want to tell people how to believe. We just want to show things that if they're true, then you tell me what you believe. You know, what does that mean to you? You know, I mean, we feel it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, once you start waking up to it. So, but each person needs to wake up to it for themselves.
And I like that message of we all have the divine spark, or we all have God within us.
One of us. Yeah, every one of us. Yeah, we're all pieces of Osiris in a way.
Yeah.
You know, from a spiritual standpoint, but then also from culturally, you know, we're all remnants of the same root civilization that collapsed. We carry aspects of that within our cultures.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been awesome, Tim. I'll let you go. I could talk to you for like 2 more hours.
Yeah.
But I
appreciate it. It's been great chatting with you. And, I like everything you have going on in your background.
Oh, thank you.
Including your mushroom.
Oh yeah. Where is it? There it is.
There it is.
I got that from my friend gave me that for my birthday. So
cool.
But,
yeah, nice. Very cool.
But thank you, Tim. You're a friend of the show now. You're always welcome on. Thank you for coming on. I'm very I'm grateful that you did this. So
well, thanks for having me, and we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, and I'll have links to all your stuff, so everyone check out the episode notes. Follow Tim. I'll have links to all of it. So thank you, Tim.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.